Hello, everyone. My name's Cam, and I'm the Head of Membership Engagement at Fundraising Everywhere. And welcome to Fundraising Everywhere Membership, the one URL that you need to save for everything fundraising, support, training, learning, and connection, including that little dose of inspiration you might need. So I'm going to give you a little tour of behind the scenes for what you get access to as part of your membership as you join the community here at Fundraising Everywhere. So first of all, we have monthly meetings and workshops that are exclusively for our members, where you can come in with your camera on or off, and we get right into the details of what's going to help you progress in your career or be an even better fundraiser, and how to support you with your well-being. We do this through discussions, practical tools and tips, so you always leave with something really tangible. Often we'll focus in these workshops on you as a human, not just a fundraiser. So we've hosted also sessions on things like how to use Canva, how to write your thank you letters, how to ensure you're managing your mental well-being, and how to prioritize your priorities. So you tell us what's important to you and what you need, and we make that happen. And that's the great thing about being a Fundraising Everywhere member. We really are member-led. So we'd love to hear from you on what you need to ensure that we can provide you with the support and inspiration that you desire. In addition to the member workshops, you also have instant access to everything on demand that we've ever hosted. But don't worry, you can filter by date, by session title, if you happen to know the name of the topic, and also by speaker, if you happen to have a favorite. So if there's something that you already know you're looking for, you can get straight to it. If you ever can't find something on the platform, please do always get in touch so that myself or someone else in the team can direct you to where that content might live on our platform. Or indeed, if it's about something we haven't thought of yet, we can ensure that we incorporate that into our future conferences and events that we host. We have over 700 hours of training sessions, webinars, workshops at Fundraising Everywhere, which is incredible, but can also mean that every time for you, we host a conference or a webinar, if you can't make it on the day, we make sure that you have access to that on demand. It's recorded and added to your on-demand library. However, we also know that 700 hours of content could sound quite overwhelming. So what we've done and what we found super helpful for our members is we've bundled together some of our top sessions and some of our most watched sessions so that you can watch these all together. And it's a really, really great starting place when you join membership. This means you can get started straight away on an area of fundraising that is specific to you. You can watch the sessions and you can get comfortable with how it all works. And then you can go off and explore everything else on the platform. And on that note of exploring everything else on the platform, you are automatically registered for all future conferences and events that we do at no extra charge as part of your membership. Even if we add new ones, which we'll continue to do in 2025 and beyond, you can always find the details of our upcoming events just below in your members area. Or you can head to the top right-hand part of the website and you can find out about the events that are happening in the future. If you look at the left-hand side of your screen, you'll see that there's also some support here. There's some support to help you get connected with each other, because we believe that community and peer support are incredibly important. So we have a LinkedIn community where you can ask questions, get your answers, or contribute to others' questions. And you can also book in here a 30-minute coaching call where you can tell us your problem, your challenge, or indeed your opportunity. And either myself or someone from the team will be able to get in touch. If it's a question that we can't answer, we've launched our member matchmaking service, which will partner you up with another member in our community who'll be able to support you. On that note, you'll also see just below, you have access to all of our members only on-demand content. So this includes our bespoke courses and programs. So here you'll see the first one is our Fresh to the Sector module. The Fresh to the Sector training program has been specifically curated for new people to the sector or to an organization. And it's all about teaching the core fundraising fundamentals. We also have our Confident Charity Leaders program, and this has been pulled together to support all existing and future leaders. It's curated of all exclusive, newly recorded content that will take you through the fundamentals of leadership training. The great thing that's in addition to our Confident Leadership program is that you can book a one-to-one coaching call with one of our expert leadership coaches. And Fundraising Everywhere will be able to pay for that coaching call that you receive as part of your membership. Fantastic. The last course that we have available, as you can see here, is the Digital Learning Skills course, which we partnered up together with Just Giving to be able to provide to up your digital skills. All of our training and bespoke programs also allow you to be able to download a certificate at the end once you've completed the module. It's a really great way, I think, to show that recognition and acknowledge that you've been on that journey and picked up all of those useful learning tools and tips that you can share with people in your organization. Last but not least, for our organizational members, you also get, on top of everything that we've just spoken about, your own learning and engagement account manager. And that's me. So what I'll do is I'll support you every single month to give you an update on how your team are doing, who your top users are, what their top sessions are that they've watched, and how they're engaging with the platform. And who within your organization is accessing different types of content that might be really useful insight to ensure that you're supporting your team to reach their goals. So I work with you to find out what it is that you and your team need, and I'll always ensure that we feed that into future conferences and events. Right, I think I mentioned this before, but I'll say it again. Once you're in with Fundraising Everywhere membership, you never have to pay for anything else. You don't have to pay for any extra training, even if we do something in real life. All you have to ensure is that you're utilizing the platform in the way that's best for you. Everyone in your charity with an email address will then get access to all of this content as well. So if this is sounding like something that's for you, please do get in touch and email me at cam@fundraisingeverywhere.com. I'd love you to become a member and talk to you more about the benefits and how we can support you to achieve your goals. I look forward to you hopefully joining our amazing community very, very soon.
Hello, everyone, and very welcome to this month's Fundraising Everywhere webinar. I'm very excited to be here, very happy to have you. My name is Simon Scriver. I am one of the co-founders of Fundraising Everywhere, and I have the privilege of introducing our speaker today, Owen Beecher from iRaiser. I'm going to run through a couple of housekeeping bits. Excuse me, I'm not in my usual place. I'm actually at a conference, an in-person conference at the moment, but one of the beauties of virtual on Fundraising Everywhere is that I can dial in from anywhere. Just to give you a couple bits of notes, perhaps you've never been here before, or perhaps you have been here before, or perhaps you're a Fundraising Everywhere member. So just first of all, I want to say thank you so much to the Fundraising Everywhere members. Obviously, you shape our content based on your feedback, based on your needs, based on what you want. So really, really grateful to all of the Fundraising Everywhere members. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to those of you who are returning. You've maybe been to a previous Fundraising Everywhere event. And for those of you who have never been to a Fundraising Everywhere event, I want to say a special thank you to you for joining, and you are very welcome. I hope this won't be the last time we see you. Just to talk you a little bit about through how this works and how the page works before I hand it over to Owen. Just a reminder that we do have our chat box there, so feel free to put in your username there. We would love to get your thoughts and share your own feelings on this as we go throughout and connect with each other. So feel free to put in your LinkedIn there, or just feel free to test it out now, say hello, let us know where you are tuning in from. You'll also see a button at the top, whichever way, for booking a demo. So if you want to know more about iRaiser, I know a number of our members and people I've worked with have been very, very happy with their experience with iRaiser. And Owen, I love Owen. He's always very helpful, very open, very welcoming. So I do recommend, if you have any questions about this, reach out to Owen afterwards. But book in that demo as well, because iRaiser are doing some amazing things out there. You will also see a copy of the slides underneath. So if you need a copy of the slides, then feel free to click down there. And don't forget to get your certificate of completion at the end. Click on the certificate button there and just fill in your details. And we will send you a little certificate so that you, your boss, your family, or your loved ones know that you have attended today. But that's it really. So yeah, please do let us know if you have any feedback. Please do share anything in. But let's not waste any more time. Let's get going. So I am really delighted to introduce the wonderful Owen Beecher. Owen's going to be talking about integrated fundraising and some of the lessons that iRaiser have found. You know, working with so many different clients and just seeing what works and what doesn't. And so I think without further ado, I'm just going to hand it straight over to Owen. So thank you all again for being here. And Owen, over to you.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you to Simon and all the crew at Fundraising Everywhere. Aside from the excellent technology, fantastic promotion, and general good group of people they tend to put together, one of the things I love about Fundraising Everywhere events is the ability to have really kind of challenging and meaningful conversations about what's next in the fundraising space and what we as a community of fundraisers can do to really seek excellence and give donors a really good experience and really kind of maximize the work we do so that the causes we represent can do the most possible work. And I think this is, you know, this is hopefully something that contributes to that conversation and goes really well. First of all, my name is Owen. I'm the director for the UK and Ireland at iRaiser. And the talk today is called The Journey from Giving to Raising. Which is something I've been thinking a lot about at the moment because I've been working very heavily on products where people make a gift in a traditional donation environment and then have an option to go on and create fundraising pages in a peer-to-peer environment and looking at how that journey works and how that journey can be made more seamless. But this isn't going to be a technical demo of that type of product. This talk is going to hopefully talk about the business case, the use case, the motivation behind why we choose to do the process of transitioning donors from one environment to another, understanding the motivation behind supporters, understanding how we put supporters at the center of that conversation. So why are we here today as the first question? I want to ask the question if we are maximizing interactions with supporters. Obviously, things like supporter acquisition is a very well-oiled topic. We always talk about that in quite a lot of detail, but supporter acquisition is not the end of the journey. Once somebody has been acquired, we need to give them the best possible product to engage with a charity on, but we also need to understand what they do next and what they want to do next. So the questions I am asking is are we engaging with supporters in the way that best suits them, in the way that they most want? And then two questions about what happens next. So what does a supporter want to do next? What is the ideal next step when somebody wants to build a meaningful long-term relationship with a charity or a good cause? And then asking ourselves, do we actually have visibility over what a supporter does next? We might have an idea of knowing what they want to do next, but the question of our tracking, our understanding, our visibility of what happens is something that's also very, very important and not a guarantee. This is a supporter journey piece, and this is an understanding for how we manage the supporter journey in an optimal way, both in terms of our way of thinking and our way of working, and also in terms of the mechanisms and the asks that allow supporters to be the best type of supporter that they want to be with us. I think starting off, it's really important to speak from the supporter's perspective and say that we see ourselves differently at different times in our life. And the thing I like to use to illustrate this is two self-portraits of Pablo Picasso. These are 70 years apart, and he's not just drawn himself as an older man, he has changed the way he structured his drawing. And that probably comes from the fact that as you get older, you don't just physically age, you emotionally age, your perspective changes, your priorities change, the way you seek joy, the way you feel trauma, all of those things change within you. And that is applicable to all walks of life. If your favorite football team loses, you will handle that loss very differently at 12 than you will at 24, than you will at 34. And these are all important things to understand when we talk about how fundraising exists as well, because the way somebody engages with a charity is different. The reason somebody engages with a charity is different. And ultimately, the capability somebody has to do that is also going to be different throughout their life as well. What that means for fundraisers: a supporter wants to engage in different activities at different times of life, but also really, really important to recognize that supporters change at different times of year, and they also change at different times of day. You are a different person. I'm certainly a different person before I've had a double espresso at 7 in the morning. I'm a very different person when I finish work in the evening, and I'm a different person based on the weather. I'm a different person based on what I've watched on television. I'm a different person whether I've been run over by somebody on a Lime bike when I've been walking the baby in the buggy just beforehand, or whether I've come home unscathed. All of these things are different. Supporters are very complex and very different people. They want to engage with us when they occupy these different periods or these different personas. Our job as fundraisers is not to tell them not to. Our job as fundraisers is to let them engage with us in different ways, is to provide an environment where a supporter can love the work that we do and engage with that work and support that work in a way that's most suitable to them, that allows them to have the longest relationship with us. We should let them do what they want to do, within reason, of course, that allows them to be the best, the perfect supporter. I want to introduce 3 people to you who don't have excellent supporter experiences. They've had some challenges of data siloing, shall we say. Bridget, many years ago, organised a cash collection in her university for the Boxing Day tsunami in 2004. Bridget receives a direct mail appeal to her mum's house once a year, asking her to do it again or do another emergency appeal fundraiser. Bridget hasn't been on a university campus in 19 years, so she's not really well primed to be organising university fundraisers. She also doesn't live in her mum's house anymore, so she doesn't get those direct mails particularly frequently. She's kind of effectively a time capsule to a data silo of a time gone by for poor Bridget. Peter did a marathon in 2009 for a medical research charity he cares quite a lot about, so somebody quite engaged with. 4 times a year, he receives an email asking him to engage in another challenge event. He doesn't ever do them because he broke his leg in 2013. So he doesn't undertake any more challenge events because he's not capable of doing so. Marcus volunteered for an environmental awareness organization in 2014. He took part in a direct action and he got arrested for that protest. As part of that group, he receives a weekly SMS offering opportunities to take part in further direct actions for that organization, and that still happens to this day. But Marcus is now a company director. He's also a dad. He would get in massive amounts of trouble at home and at work if he was still engaging in some of those direct actions. So he's not been responding to those things for a long time. All 3 of these people are basically people who are receiving a specifically poor experience because the organizations they've previously engaged with have not considered them as growing, changing people. And that's something that's a failing in some sectors. Now, that's not to say that they don't have other interactions with other organizations that are fruitful, but in these specific cases, these are 3 specific poor interactions. Bridget, Peter, and Marcus aren't their real names. All of them are actually called Owen. All of them are me. I no longer do cash collections at university because I don't go to university anymore. I no longer run challenge events aside from the leg break. I think the first time I ever finished a half marathon, the first thing I said when I crossed the finish line was, I'm never in my life doing that again. That was really painful and awful. More power to the people who love those things. That is not me, and I'm sure I'm not the only person that expresses that sentiment once they get over the hump of doing a major challenge. I also no longer chain myself to the railings of certain government buildings. It's too much responsibility, and I get in lots of trouble at home for doing that. What I am now is a monthly donor. I give by direct debit to a number of organizations. I'm also a mid-value donor. So I have a couple of charities that I specifically give to that I would be in their category for mid-value gifts or range exceeding £300 a year or whatever the case may be. I'm also a corporate donor. I have a CSR budget that I distribute and also provide work pro bono. And I'm a community fundraiser. I'm involved in some local community groups and organise things like pub quizzes, music nights, community gardening events, bake sales, stuff like that. That's how I engage as a charity supporter at the moment. In the future, I mean, the reality for a lot of us is we will lose loved ones in the future, and we may set up tribute funds on behalf of those loved ones. I would also envisage that the charities I'm committed to as a mid-value donor now, at some point in the future, will exceed that and become a higher value donor. And I will also, at some point, die, and I will leave money to charities or a charity in my will, and I will become a legacy donor. That is a complex donor lifespan that engages with a number of products that at different parts of a life, at different motivations, at different circumstances will change. And that's really important for our understanding of how we facilitate that type of relationship as best as possible. Because what I will say is that in some circumstances, I've had a one and done interaction with the charity, and because they haven't asked me in the right way, I haven't thought to give to them again. But in some circumstances where I've grown into a much more involved relationship with charities, that has been because the way they've allowed me to get involved has made it very easy for me to become passionate about a cause. And that's an experience that I think to center us all in using our own experience for how we get good engagement. I think that's very, very important to analyze. In terms of what we want to ask is how we can be there for our supporters as they grow and engage in different ways. And I think this is a concept that I call supporting the supporter. And there are 4 cornerstones of support that a supporter needs. The first is speaking directly to them. Second being understanding when they want to be spoken to. The third being telling them how much you value them. And the fourth being giving them an easy way to speak to you. So it should be a full circle of you approaching a supporter, taking them on a good journey, and then getting them to a point where they come back to you as a partner. Supporters, the best type of supporter who is a lifetime donor, a lifetime fundraiser, a lifetime engager, becomes a partner to that charity, becomes somebody who attaches their identity to that charity. And that's really, really important. And I'll go through what these concepts mean, because they might not be as simple as they look from a sentence perspective. When I speak about talking directly to supporters, one of the things that rests fundamentally here is the concept of first party. Now, obviously, a lot of what I'm talking about is very digitally focused, partly because that's where my area of expertise sits, but also partly because it's the overwhelmingly popular growth space for the charity sector by a long way. So when I speak about first party, I speak about the context of having a direct relationship with a supporter. So if you're using a platform to engage a supporter, are you the owner of that platform, or is that platform owned by a third party? If you are the first party owner, then you have a lot of advantages. So your relationship will be directly with the supporter. You are the merchant, you're the data controller. The supporter is only engaging with your brand. So the only person, the only voice they're hearing is you. The only logo they're seeing is your logo. That is really, really important for making sure that you're cementing the strength of a relationship with a supporter. And what's really important about understanding the value of first party is if you want to do something else, if you want to move that supporter from one place to another, that might be, if you're choosing to retool and create new fundraising platforms and build new products, it might just be if the supporter is engaging in one activity and they've indicated that they want to engage in another activity, having the ease of ability to do that is really important. So when you are a first party data owner and controller, you have that ability to migrate to new platforms, you have that ability to bring your supporters with you because you own the relationship with the supporter. Third parties don't necessarily have that. There is a level of opting in third parties. So you can go and give to another company on behalf of a charity. They will pass that money to that charity. You may have the opportunity to opt in for further communications with that supporter, but you still don't have that first party owned relationship. And in a lot of cases, you just won't have the visibility of the data. You won't have any control over the data. And you won't have the same level of consistent brand experience. Now, third-party platforms are valuable. I'm not here to turn around and say first party is the only show in town and third party is terrible. That's not the case at all. There are third party platforms out there that have revolutionized the world for certain causes and charities, and have been incredibly powerful in doing so. My company has a third party platform ourselves that we use for certain events that really is valuable for raising an awful lot of money. And I'll provide a link. I'll show you what it looks like as part of this talk. So there is a value in being there with third parties, but when you are talking about having a perfect long-term relationship with a supporter, understanding how to get the supporter into a first-party environment is so important to have that next step of value. It also reduces your risk as well. You know, if a third party decides it wants to pull out of the market, or if it goes bust and leaves, you're losing that supporter forever. You don't have permission to contact them. With first party data, you own it. You always have that safety. This is something that in all walks of fundraising in the digital space, all charities, all fundraisers should be asking themselves constantly, what is my relationship? It doesn't mean you have to abandon third party. You shouldn't. All the big third party platforms that you know of and you're thinking of right now, you should still keep accounts with them. You absolutely should still keep accounts with them. But when you're talking about, you know, best practice for transitioning a supporter through a good supporter journey, that first party platform is key. And that's something that's really important for your voice to be heard. That's you speaking. This is an example of a first-party platform. It's an event site for charity against breast cancer, and they have their event Breast Walk Ever. They own this space. They are the merchant. If somebody makes a donation, it goes directly to them. It's their bank account. It's their name on the statement. It's their opt-in. So if they're making ongoing comms with people, they own the marketing opt-in. They're the data controller in all cases. Simple, first-party, very clean. Everybody knows where they are, and it can be really powerful. In the exact same capacity, the exact same content management system and software has been used to produce a third-party platform, which is a platform called Dossard Solidaire. It's a platform that runs events in France, most notably the Paris Marathon. And this is a platform where charities share the space. So when you come on, your supporter is free. They will apply to run the marathon or the 10K or whatever the case may be, and they will be free to choose who they support, and they'll be free to fundraise in the way they choose. Obviously, there is advantages to that because it creates a good space for the donors, and there's loads of value in that. It raises lots and lots of money. But it also takes away some of the control that the charity have over the donor, and the ability the charity might have to communicate over a long-term basis might get lost in that. So charities must make a decision about where they see value in leveraging the power of third parties, or where they see an opportunity to interact directly and have the full ownership of the process themselves. Visually, I don't think the donor cares because the user experience is broadly the same. The buttons work in the same way. The email confirmation works in the same way because it's using the same software platform. It's just owned by different controllers and merchants. And that's really a kind of a back office question for ourselves. Next is wanting to understand when, and to a certain extent, how a supporter wants to be spoken to. And this is all about analyzing data to maximize impact. One of the biggest challenges the charity sector has is dealing with the lessons of time gone by. So, you know, we have this challenge where we have very established ways of working over 20, 30, 40, 50 years in some cases. And the lessons that are learned, the way we communicate with supporters is maintained and sometimes just copied and pasted into new media. One of the biggest bugbears I've ever had is kind of taking over email campaigns and seeing email campaigns constructed in the same way as a direct mail campaign, which, you know, fundamentally, those are two different ways of communicating with people. They should have two different voices, two different formats. So trying to understand and prove and make the business case for how we make good choices about when and how we speak to supporters is really important. And this takes kind of a challenge for fundraisers to break down established ways of thinking. So, you know, you will have, generally speaking, most organizations will have, a database that focuses on demographic. So ABC1 home counties is your gold standard. You may also have a CRM system that looks at RFM modeling in its decision making for when you give next. There are other elements of data that you can use to make good decisions. And I've mentioned a couple of them here. It's not exhaustive, but seasonality is something that's really, really important. I have, talked at length before directly to service providers and at conferences about the failure to layer in seasonality into things like TV advertising in terms of the reporting on that. But we know that there are various things that happen throughout the course of the year that will make donations to certain causes go up. Christmas individual giving campaigns, lots of organizations see spikes. People who do well with major donors will have end of tax year campaigns. If you have a good corporate fundraising engagement point, you might have a lot of fundraisers attached to like summer parties and away days. And then you'll also have your own events and news cycles that will make seasonal asks make sense. You can also have a more specific pinpointed timing as well. And part of the point about direct mail being sometimes, the learnings of direct mail being a bit of a hindrance, you can't really pinpoint when somebody's interacting with a direct mail journey. You will send somebody a letter, you are then reliant on Royal Mail to deliver that letter, or on post if you're in Ireland. Both of whom, are not known for providing the most exemplary and specific service. You're then reliant on a further variable of when somebody checks their post, and when somebody chooses to open a letter, and when somebody chooses to engage with the content of that direct mail. So you've got this whole kind of powerful way of fundraising that is based on a lot of unknowns. And ultimately, if somebody in the direct mail constituent group is posting back the insert, you're then reliant on the mail all over again and the fulfillment house taking it and processing the gift. And you ultimately get very little beyond, these left our fulfillment house on this date and they came back on this date, and that's all we really have. With digital communications, you can pinpoint when somebody clicked on the site, you can pinpoint how long they stayed on the site, you can pinpoint when they made their donation, and that can give you a much more richer understanding of data. You can let you understand, what level of brand impact you may have had on triggering a donation, how your cause-related activity might have triggered specific donations to be made. You can understand things like split testing business time versus home life, and I will build narratives about donations made within business hours being responsive to more functional and analytical asks, whereas donations made in the evening when people are not focused on their job or their spreadsheet and they're focused more on their family and their television show, those donations can be more susceptible to kind of emotional triggers and things like that. So there is narratives you can build based on having a very specific understanding of when and how a donation takes place, and that can allow you to create understandings of preferences. And ultimately the goal behind this is facilitating more opportunities to give. It's not always appropriate to ask somebody to give again, but sometimes it is. Giving is wonderful. People love to give. There is a misconception in the charity sector that, we should be ashamed of fundraising, that we ask for money because we have to. No, donors see the gift they've given as the biggest contribution they can make, because when you think about time, money, and voice, money is the hardest thing to acquire. We've all got time and we've all got a voice, but we're all not guaranteed to have money. So choosing to give that money away is one of the biggest endorsements of the work, and people are proud to give. So asking again, finding new opportunities to give, facilitating supporters to give more frequently, if done in the right way, is an incredibly powerful thing to build a stronger and better and happier relationship to a supporter. And I think a lot of organizations are sometimes hindered by the fact that asking for money is a shameful thing, and it's not. Asking for money is asking for somebody to show us how proud they are that they care about this cause. I don't think anybody is ashamed of the charity donations they give. I think every charity that I give to, the only thing I have is that I can't go on about it too much. I love telling people that I support organizations that fight for a clean planet, the organizations that fight for people's human rights, organizations that fight to end war. These are great. We should facilitate more of that. And this is what we're doing here. We're trying to find ways of working and ways of thinking to do that. And the last thing I've mentioned there is hand raising, and sometimes this is the kind of simple thing where, the easiest way to find out a piece of information about somebody is to ask them for that piece of information, because likely they're just going to tell you. So motivation can be tracked and should be tracked through, the kind of nuanced little digital tools that you have. You should look at your meta ads dashboard. You should understand what type of creative ad produced what type of click-through rate, what type of case study supporter asked, what worked. But sometimes if you ask a supporter why they're giving, they may tell you something that you hadn't considered, and that may lead you into a fundraising product that can be really, really powerful. So hand raisers, absolutely fantastic. Sometimes just saying, look, what's your reason for donating? Are you doing this for this reason? Can allow, an entire new journey, an entire new way of working to be created by just now knowing that actually this is a layer of focus. We can have additional asks for this constituent group because it makes sense, it's semantic, it's tonally appropriate, it all works, and it's dramatically valuable in terms of boosting revenue and getting to that point of saying we want somebody to take a second action, we want somebody to transition from their first point of interaction to something more valuable, we want somebody who is a donor to become a fundraiser, we want somebody who signed a petition to become an advocate. This is all really, really important. In terms of kind of doing that data, I wanted to just pinpoint a very small number of uncommon KPIs. One being payment methods. I think people don't, maybe they consider direct debit versus card payment on a very simple level because of, regular giving and stuff. But understanding payment methods can help you build a narrative about who's donating. Apple Pay increased across a very, very large sample size by 400% between 2022 and 2023. I am quoting a number of figures in this. They're all from iRaiser benchmark, so they're all data we've acquired directly on a first-party basis. The increase in using things like Apple Pay gives a much bigger picture about use of mobile devices, about use of direct, easy to facilitate gifts, reduction of friction, potentially looking at increasing volumes of lower value donors. If you make £1 million this year and you make £1 million next year, that's not necessarily the same because you might have lost a bunch of donors for one reason from one year and acquired a bunch of donors from another reason in another year. And changing donor behavior can be really, really important to understand that. And it can really be really important to not, I guess, miss out on the maximizing the impact of the new donors, but also not chase the people you've lost. So that's something that's really, really important for creating a good data narrative. Timestamps, as I mentioned earlier, super important just from distributing things during the day. I used to work for a startup many moons ago. It was a mum and baby startup. We had a board advisor who was a marketing lecturer. He insisted that Thursday at 3 p.m. was the best time to send emails to people. We completely ignored him. We sent them at 6 in the morning because that's when people were doing the first feed of the morning and trying to plan out what things to do for the day or their week. And we had a significantly increased open rate, click-through rate and revenue rate from sending things at 6 in the morning. And the board advisor was tearing his hair out, screaming at us for doing the wrong thing. We understood our timestamps. We understood what that meant when we created a narrative about our specific audiences, and it worked, and it bucked that trend, and it did really, really well. Your data will tell you stories, and the time that people make donations will tell you stories. The last click source as well is something that you might say that's not an uncommon KPI. We all know that. Well, you look at it for budgets. You kind of say, look, we had a load of money generated from paid search. We'll increase the money we spend on paid search. That's fine. But I also think it's important for understanding motivation and narrative, and I'm going to draw on something that kind of highlights that later. But the interdependency between different things a supporter engages with is very, very important. Dwell time is something that's important as well. You will often look at things like conversion rates and bounce rates. They're basically the same thing. They're just counterfactual versions of each other. So, in a fundraising ask, they get to a donate page, they either give or they don't, unless you're having ludicrous additional steps. Your conversion rate and your bounce rate should basically be the inverse of each other. If 40% of people are converting, 60% of people should be bouncing, unless you have unnecessary steps, which would be silly. Dwell time is more important because it builds a narrative of what they went through psychologically when they reached your page. Did they spend a lot of time considering how to give? Did they spend a little bit of time considering how to give? Were they somebody that just wanted to get to the end point really quickly? Were they somebody that needed value propositions? And that leads into something called intent. And intent, again, is not conversion rate. People confuse intent and conversion rate because they don't like to talk about why donors don't give. if 40% of people convert, there may have been people who intended to give that didn't make a gift for whatever reason. And that's a really important KPI to understand. In different areas with different traffic sources, you're going to have different ratios. But on a very simple level, most web sources are going to produce 3 degrees of intent. One is people who are visiting your site because they want to give immediately. Let me give. How do I give? What button do I press? One, because of people who are interested. They've been brought there via some kind of trigger that's got them onto the site. They're not 100% sure. They didn't wake up in the morning thinking I definitely want to give, but with a good experience, you can get them to give. That's kind of middling intent. And then you're going to have tire kickers. You're going to have people who click accidentally. You're going to have people who have no intention of giving, have loads of strong resolve, but they found their way on the site. They're going to look at it. They're going to leave. They exist too. And understanding how you map out intent on a basis of source can lead you to making better decisions about where an audience will go next, how you will look at saying, right, we understand how plugged in somebody is. Does that mean they're ready for an additional ask? I would say super high intent donors may not be very susceptible to secondary asks. That might be a case that their focus is solely on giving that gift and then they're gone. It may be the middle quadrant that's more open for doing the marathon or sitting in a bathtub of baked beans or something like that. So it's all about trying to understand what your data does. Really importantly, you need to interrogate these narratives and not do misleading conclusions. There was a wonderful talk recently on cover fee modules and whether asking donors to cover fees on websites was a valuable interaction. And there was some data introduced from a study that suggested that people who covered the fees were less likely to give a second time. And the conclusion was that asking for people to cover the fees kills your second gift strategy, which I would, and I'm coming this from a point of privilege and I have a lot of access to data with regard to cover fees and second gifts. I would say that's fundamentally untrue. I would say the hypothesis I would write is that people who are committed givers engage more with the page and probably are more likely to understand the requirement for cover fees and probably remove them because they're involved in habitual behavior. They're giving lots of gifts. They're giving to lots of charities. They're a little bit wiser to the system. Whereas a more casual donor who's less likely to be a second donor anyway is possibly looking at the cover fee unit and saying, yeah, whatever, I'll give you £2 extra. And that would be my conclusion based on the benefit of having quite a lot of data. But the discussion that was happening missed that and ultimately created what was quite a poor narrative because ultimately the data had not been interrogated by a wide enough group of people who could add those stories. And that's where collaboration is really important. Your data team are going to be fantastic. They're going to be so knowledgeable. Data people know how to pull insight out. They know how to work with technical products. They're really, really valuable. Sometimes you need somebody that doesn't necessarily have that closeness to the data to come in and give an alternative perspective. So breaking down those silos and getting as many people as possible working on your data is going to be really important. Most importantly, your data is better than somebody else's data. If you don't have any data, then research from others is valuable, and other people's research is valuable for guiding your decision making. But your hierarchy of decision making should always be based on how your data performs, because your supporters are unique. The reason they choose you as a charity is different to the reason they choose the charity next door as a charity. That's really, really important. This is a thing I show in a lot of talks, and this is probably the only thing in this talk that isn't completely brand new in terms of things I talk about. But this is an exercise of mapping touch points for supporters. And this will be sent out in a PDF afterwards. You can screenshot whatever you like. This is an exercise I recommend everybody does, because not only does it allow people to map out a supporter's journey in such a way they can get more clarity on where they can have impact and lever pulling, but it also gives people an understanding of the interdependency between different fundraising and marketing activities, not just for first-time donors, but when we're talking about, somebody starting their journey having become a donor, we want to understand what level of activity is going to benefit and build them into somebody who gives again, gives in another way, engages with other products, shifts from being somebody who gives us a tenner to somebody who goes and raises 750 quid doing a bike ride. And that's the kind of question that we need to ask. Having maps, literally putting things on walls with post-its, can be a really useful tool for visualizing that. Sometimes to kind of, to understand how big the challenge is, sometimes to understand where the key priorities lie and which bits and pieces we have no control over and we don't work with. But this type of mapping exercise is something I've talked about loads of talks before, something I've done with loads of charities. If people in the audience are people who've worked directly one-on-one in training sessions with us, you will have seen this probably on a wall in your own boardroom at some point, but this exercise is really valuable. I also want to talk about telling supporters how much you value them. And there's kind of three ways of doing this. So there's communication, community, and thanks. So good communication is multi-stage. It's telling somebody what their gift does. It's, if you're looking at an event, telling somebody clearly where the start line is. It's personalizing a journey, what the supporters' needs may be. It's ultimately having a communication strategy that makes things really, really easy to engage with. That's not necessarily, a functional thing, but it's a signposting thing. It's an awareness thing that boosts a supporter's relationship by increasing trust and increasing kind of that understanding. You want your supporter to think, this charity makes it easy for me to keep doing things with them. That's a really simple interaction you want. Community is also really important. So this is something that's not necessarily immediately achievable for everybody, but if you can create a community of supporters, you can exponentially grow and improve the value. People will work together. People will support each other. People will start to, engage as friends. If you think about things like running clubs, Parkrun is a fantastic example of communities that seem to have grown organically, that have completely outgrown what the original grouping or organization could have ever imagined would happen. You can also look at things like Movember as social movements that the community is enormous and powerful and really, really valuable. If you can create a community and get them working together to become advocates for you, you create super fundraisers. And that is an excellent way that you can facilitate. You will see some people will do things like gaming streaming type fundraising events, and they will use platforms like Discord to create communities for people taking part in the events. It's not necessarily for your entire demographic, but if you can hit it right on Discord, you can create a community of fundraisers who will be your fundraisers for 5-10 years. And that's really, really powerful in terms of revenue, but also in terms of value and other key goals that you have. And then lastly, saying thank you. It doesn't have to be said because so many organizations do get this completely right, but it is often worth reiterating that saying thank you is the most important interaction a charity will have with a supporter. But it may not be as simple as you think. And I'm going to identify 3 thank yous that you can give. One is before a gift. And this is a marketing strategy, but having a thanks in advance piece of content is something that's used in the private sector. It's something that's used in public health. You will see signs up in public places saying thank you for not smoking. That is a thanks in advance. That is a message used to create a presumption of an action. And that can be really, really valuable in lots of types of interactions with the public. But ultimately, before a gift, a thanks in advance can communicate the value of a donation, but it can also set an appropriate tone that we will be grateful for what you give us. And that's really, really important. When a gift is given, obviously that's really, really important. So thanking somebody immediately once a gift is the most important interaction you're going to get. That's the key thing, that if you have any hope of creating a long-term relationship with a supporter, that immediate thank you is important. We're trained to do it, when we're kids and we get, our aunt sends us a £5 for our birthday. I might be showing my age by saying a £5. I think the rates have gone up these days. But when we get that gift from an aunt, your mum immediately hands you the phone and says, ring your auntie and say thank you. And that's something that we're not only primed to do, but we're also primed to expect. When a supporter gives to a charity, whether they're aware of it or not, whether they're willing to say it in a focus group or not, subconsciously they expect to be thanked. If you don't have that thank you, you will not be continuing a relationship with them. So it's so easy and it's so important for facilitating ongoing journeys. And then you have a follow-up thank you. So a historic thank you. So when you need a gift in the future, thanking somebody for a previous gift is an excellent way to trigger that conversation again. So 6 months ago, you gave us this gift. It was really powerful. It did really well for us. We were able to do these amazing things with us. Thank you so much for that gift. Would you like to do that again? It's a really important tool of thanking people. And I think people often think of thank you as the immediate thing, but the long tail thank you can be really important for creating a value in a relationship with the supporter, and ultimately creating a scenario where not every ask you put out is going to result in a gift, but if the experience you put out there is positive, that when that supporter is feeling generous and is looking to give, they will choose the charity they had a good experience with over the charity they didn't have as good an experience with. And that's something to remember as well. You're not controlling every ask and inbound thing. Sometimes you're just simply giving people a nice time so that when it comes to the time that they've got a few quid in their pocket, they'll remember you over somebody else. The classic example of that is Coca-Cola spend all of their advertising budget and they never once tell you where to buy a Coke. They never tell you how expensive a Coke costs. They never ask you to buy a Coke. They just put their logo up and they know at a later date you will be in a shop and you will remember that logo and you will reach for their product over somebody else's. And that's what thanking is. That's what branding is. It's so important. And then lastly, I want to talk about giving people an easy way to speak to you. So that's harnessing the power of product. Specifically because of my own experience, product, I want to talk about online giving platforms, but I'm not somebody who dies on a massive hill when it comes to products. I think the definition of product can be super loose, as long as it's something that's meaningful for you as a fundraiser, as long as it allows you to do work, pull levers, make more money. If something is worthwhile considering a product, then consider it a product, work with it as a product, and off you go. You absolutely do not need to pay your registration fee to the Scrum Alliance and pay extortionate fees for niche definitions of what products are. If something is a product for you, use it as a product. Broadly speaking, there's an expectation with online giving that people will have, a page where they can give online. And we can analyze on the front door what value those pages have. So I can look at a campaign like this, which is a mock-up of an upgrade campaign. I immediately have an accessibility toolbar to ensure everybody can use the checkout page. I have a logo in place to make sure the supporter knows they're in the right place. I have a personalized call to action that's transparent and engaging, that references the supporter's name, and it also references their existing monthly gift. I've then given a range of options so that I can make sure the supporter feels comfortable. I'm not asking for too much. I'm not asking for too little, giving them a bit of flexibility. And then I have action points in high contrast colors. Super straightforward way of asking for money in a very easy way. Our question is what happens next? So when we talk about transitioning supporters to new ways of giving, to second gifts, there is often a feeling that that's a long-term plan. So you acquire a donor, you send them a welcome pack, you send them an early retention journey for 3 months, and then you transition them onto the main retention journey, and then you filter them gradually into the cash appeal schedule that you send 4 times a year. I want to talk about when it's appropriate to ask people a little bit quicker for money. I want to talk about turning a donor into a fundraiser straight away. We have a product that allows you to check a box. When you make your donation to an organization, it allows you to opt into creating a fundraising page straight away. So you go onto the website, you click the donate button. In this case, you've given the Cancer Alliance €150. You've selected that box. Once you've completed your donation, you are then sent a link to a fundraising page for the Cancer Alliance, which is your fundraising page. It includes your gift as a kickoff. It creates a target for you to share with your friends and then fundraise for something you feel passionate about yourself. This is, something that allows for an additional meaningful interaction. But what I will say is that it's not necessarily going to be meaningful or useful for every donation. Certainly, a large amount of donors will not have the facility to run their own peer-to-peer campaign. Certainly a large amount of donors just, probably won't engage or won't understand what's happening there. So understanding where opportunities lie based on what we've done previously, we've layered in things like timing, things like intent, things like motivation. We've created this concept of hand raisers to tell us why somebody's donating. This is when we start saying, okay, now we know what your motivation is. Is it appropriate for us to ask you to set up a fundraising page as a next action in the journey? And I want to demonstrate some use cases where that might be the case. So while I'm not suggesting that this becomes a blanket feature of every donation page in the world, because quite frankly, it's just going to be dead space on the internet that nobody's going to use, there are certainly areas where you can massively increase supporter engagement by having a seamless journey from being a donor into being a fundraiser. First one is in-memory and tribute funds. There's a little screen grab here that I've taken where an organization asks if a donation is made in memory of a loved one. If somebody ticks that box, those two additional fields pop out conditionally saying what's the loved one's full name and what the relationship with the person is. That's ostensibly done for data enrichment. It's also done for a better thank you experience. If somebody ticks that box, then they'll receive a slightly different thank you email that's a little bit more tone appropriate and that might reference the gift being made in tribute. Really simple, really good, nice quality supporter experience fundraising. And, you know, for this particular website that I took this from, they've shown that by doing this, they've increased their revenue massively and it's done really well and people love it. But with gifts in memory, it's not a kind of single product. Gifts in memory are sometimes made in isolation. You might make one single gift in tribute or in memory of somebody. And other times they're made as part of a collection. So you will see tribute funds, you will see anniversary funds, you'll see funds in lieu of flowers, stuff like that. It happens all the time. Having a fundraising page as your core ask can sometimes be a little bit much, and you might lose out on those single givers. But similarly, only asking for a single gift might miss out on those core funders. So what I would propose in this scenario is creating an event where conditionally, based on somebody's response, if they indicate that they've given on behalf of a loved one, you then can serve an additional journey. And that's what we talked about with hand raisers earlier. Somebody's put their hand up and saying, this gift is in mem. Okay, now you've raised your hand and told me that this is an in mem gift. Now I can say to you, actually, it makes total sense for me to say, you know, you've given a gift in mem. Did you want to also set up a fundraising page on behalf of that person as well? And that is something that makes sense. It's semantic, it's seamless, and it creates a user journey that's meaningful, that doesn't have friction. And ultimately, you know, as we said, is that concept of giving the supporter a nice time. And that's something that can be really powerful. In terms of the value of this type of stuff, you know, a single gift is a single gift. We would project that the average amount raised from an active in-memory page, so that is an in-memory page that has had at least one donation, that the average amount raised will be £450. If you think about converting, you think about all the in-mem donors that happen, if you think 10% of those convert to active pages, within a very short period of time, you are talking significant increases in revenue. You're also talking about new people who are donating to your charity, possibly for the first time because of the connection with the loved one who's deceased, which is something that you can't replicate anywhere else. So you as an organization will have your way of acquiring supporters. Peer-to-peer is valuable because it creates networks and audiences that you can't normally reach. And what you've just done is taken a single gift and turned it into 8 or 9 new supporters who've never given to you before, but now have made a gift to you for the very first time because of this in-memory fund. They will remember that they had a good experience with you, and they may become supporters in other ways in the future. And that is, you know, massively scalable and really important. And it's not done so in a way that's jarring to the user. It's done so in a way that the user actually expects. It's my expectation that if I want to set up a fund, you know, a collection in lieu of flowers for a funeral, I absolutely want somebody to make it as easy as possible for me to do that, rather than for me to have to go Google all these third-party platforms and set them up. The other use case is community fundraising. I have worked very closely with a community fundraiser who I massively respect, and whose opinion I trust on community fundraising in all capacities. The guy won an MBE for his services to fundraising. He's a superstar. But me and him used to argue relentlessly about what we could put on forms. he always wanted to find out exactly why a donation was being made so they could identify community collections. And I was coming at it from the opposite side and saying any additional friction is a point of drop off. And I would argue for no friction. He would argue for lots of questions. I think a happy medium is putting in a conditional field for a donation being made on behalf of an organization. In this particular example, it's a school or organization, but you might have, broader ask for any kind of community group. What that can do is identify the kind of the gap in the journey that often exists. So anybody who's pored over a fundraising report will have looked at basically any amount of money paid in that's an odd number. So your normal 50 quid, 80 quid, 120 quid asks, normal. Occasionally something will come in for £243.67, and that gift will probably trigger in your mind, and you will say that's probably a collection that somebody's made and they've just paid it in via their credit card or whatever. They haven't told us about it. We don't know what it is. It's kind of basically, unsolicited community fundraising that we don't have access to. Biggest challenge for a community fundraiser is to get access to those people, not only to attribute the money better and kind of identify the value of the activity, but also to help people raise more money and to safeguard them if they're doing anything that's difficult. And that's a very real concern in the community fundraising space. People will do enormously dangerous things for charity all the time, and the charity is often desperate to speak to them and say, please don't do that. How about you do one of these things? How about we support you in a different way? And that's something that can be really important. But in this kind of use case, we are understanding the gap for community fundraisers. Normally, we're giving a very easy and frictionless way for somebody to identify that they are part of an organization. If they are then part of an organization or doing something on behalf, we can then very easily offer them an opportunity to create a fundraising page. That's really important because ultimately what we're doing is going from an unsupported fundraiser to supported fundraiser, and we would expect a supported fundraiser with tools, with posters, with QR codes, with all of these marketing materials would raise a significant amount more than an unsupported fundraiser. And there's no real cost behind this type of stuff. It's just giving somebody a better journey naturally and reaping the rewards of that. One of the stats we're looking at here with this type of ask or this type of ongoing connection is the repeat rate. So we would estimate, based on data available from benchmarks, that first-time donors have a lifetime repeat rate of 1.15. That means if you get 100 first-time donors, maximum 15 of them will go on to make a second gift. That doesn't mean to all charities, but that means to a specific individual charity. Those donors may still support other charities, of course, but a charity's expectation right now, people coming through the front door, is that only 15% of people will give again. Second-time donors have a repeat rate of 1.6%, and that's consistent when you increase the lever on first time. So putting more first-time donors into the funnel, generating more second-time donors from that pool will hold consistent on that 1.6% repeat rate. So our hypothesis here is that by getting people to take a second action, you will have a domino effect of exponential growth on third actions, fourth actions, fifth actions. And the goal is to have more and more people in that pool of people who are engaged in habitual behavior, giving frequently, engaging in multiple different ways, looking at different products, having a donor life cycle, and ultimately, when they gave you a $5 as a 21-year-old, they then give you $5,000 as a 50-year-old with loads of money in their bank account. And that's that journey we want to get to and touch on all of those things in between. So having that level of growth is so important. Understanding the value that is potentially in there is so important. It's sometimes very easy to not understand the opportunity, to think about, if I increase my second gift from 15% to 20%, realistically that's only worth about 800 quid in this month. Is 800 quid really worth tooling up new products? Well, no. I mean, if it's worth 800 quid every month, and if it's worth a compounding 20% on top of that every year, then that's massive for the organization over a long period of time, and that does make it worth it. It's that one of, if I gave you a penny today and doubled it every day for the next month, would you take it? And obviously people immediately don't think of that as a huge amount of money, but when they do the maths, they realize they'd be rich beyond their wildest dreams. So that's the kind of concepts we're dealing with here, is how to try and make sure that we identify these opportunities and grow them. The key focus, and I'm going to finish up now just under the hour, we will send a PDF of this talk out. I believe it's available to download immediately from the Fundraising Air dashboard. But obviously you're more than welcome to come directly to me at any point in the future if you want to talk about anything. The key focus is here is that acquiring donors is one step, making sure that the journey is good, that they receive good and appropriate asks is really important for making sure that you have lifetime long-term success. The data that you gather is vital. It's one of the most important resources you get. The learnings you take from the interactions will guide you on what to do next and will massively increase the success of your decision making. The supporter behavior will indicate those opportunities. If a supporter comes in and tells you they're giving in a specific way, that will open a door to asking them in specific ways to engage again, and that's really, really important. And immediate follow-up can be really beneficial and natural. So understanding that some people not only are happy to be asked very quickly again, but it's actively an enriching way for them to engage with you as a charity is something that is a challenge to a lot of organizations, but it is something that I promise is very, very valuable. And just to reiterate that point about first party, where at all possible, if you want to ask big questions of your supporters, if you want to not just optimize in the small percentiles, but make big changes to your organization's revenue streams, that first party ownership gives you so much more flexibility. It's the difference between selling something yourself versus relying on somebody else to put it on their shelves. It's so valuable to be able to have full control and flexibility, not just about what type of products you put out there, but also about controlling the messaging and the voice. And your voice is so important. The way you speak to people, the way you thank people is just so important in terms of how you have success with building a lifetime of relationships with donors. That's me under the hour, hopefully. Thank you so much to the guys at Fundraising Everywhere for these talks. They're just I love having the opportunity to do them. I hope this one has been valuable. I am, of course, going to be attending a bunch of the rest of the talks that Fundraising Everywhere have on because they're always bangers. And if I can be ever included in that conversation, I'm always delighted to do so. I'm always here for anybody who needs help with any of these concepts, even if it's just a little bit of data to kick a business case in the right direction and convince a group of trustees to sign off on something. Please do let me know if I can ever be of help. I used to include a Twitter in this, but I'm not doing Twitter anymore because of the person that owns it. But you can get me on LinkedIn or email or carrier pigeon or whatever the case may be. Thank you all for today. I hope you all have a wonderful